Okay, hello everybody. Mr. Bryson here. Today we're going to be reading starting from line 1644 and going until I think it's appropriate to stop. In the last reading, Beowulf defeated Grendel's mother, destroyed feminism, became the hero he was meant to be, and so now we're going to find out the aftermath. Again, this is line 1644. In he came then, the Thane's commander, the arch-warrior, to address Hrothgar. His courage was proven, his glory was secure. Grendel's head was hauled by the hair, dragged across the floor where people were drinking, a horror from badly. If God had not helped me, the outcome would have been quick and fatal. Although Hrunting is hard-edged, I could never bring it to bear in battle. But the man of men allowed me to behold, for he often helps the unbefriended. An ancient sword shining on the wall, a weapon made for giants, there for the wielding. Then my moment came, in the combat, and I struck the dwellers in that den. Next seemed sword blade melted. It bloated and it burned in their rushing blood. I have wrested the hilt from the enemy's hand, avenged the evil done to the Danes. It is what was due. And this I pledge, O Prince of the Shieldings, you can sleep secure with your company of troops in Heorot Hall. Never feed your fear for a single thane of your sept or nation, young warriors or old, that laying waste of life that you and your people endured of yore. Okay, a couple of things. The mention of the Damascened sword, I may have mentioned that in the past. A Damascened sword is a special kind of sword. You should definitely look it up and find out some things. You can even do your research paper about it. But it is an extra hard, extra sharp sword that is respected for its craftsmanship. And it's not of another world. They make them here on Earth. But for some reason, Beowulf seems to think that Grendel's mother's lair had one hanging on the wall. And he gives all credit to God for helping him decide who would win between him and the two monsters. He gives a lot. He's still giving, Grendel credit for fighting, even though he was like lying in a corner dead. All right, moving on. Then the gold hilt was handed over to the old lord, a relic from long ago for the venerable ruler. That rare smith work was passed on to the Prince of Danes when those devils perished. Once death removed that murdering, guilt-steeped, God-cursed fiend, eliminating his unholy life and his mother's as well, it was willed that the king who, of all the lavish gift lords of the north, was the best regarded between the two seas. So he's going to give the leftover hilt from the melted sword to Hrothgar. Hrothgar spoke. He examined the hilt, the relics of old times. It was engraved all over and showed how war first came into the world, and the flood destroyed the tribe of giants. They suffered a terrible severance from the Lord. The Almighty made the waters rise, drowned them in the deluge for retribution. In pure gold inlay on the sword guards, there were rune markings correctly incised, stating and recording for some the sword had been first made and ornamented with its scroll-work hilt. Then everyone hushed as the son of Halfdane spoke his wisdom. A protector of his people, pledged to uphold truth and justice, and to respect tradition, is entitled to affirm that this man was born to distinction. Beowulf, my friend, your fame has gone far and wide. You are known everywhere. In all things you are even-tempered, prudent and resolute. So I stand firm by the promise of friendship we exchanged before. Forever you will be your people's mainstay and your own warrior's helping hand. Okay, before moving on, I think the sword is kind of worthy of research. Like, this needs to be looked into a little bit more. They're talking about runes and ancient writing and a race of giants and a flood and God's decision. Like, we're all familiar with the flood that involved Noah. But what about, is that what this is referring to? Okay, so that's an interesting question, maybe worthy of research. Okay, let's keep going. Hrothgar's saying what a good king is supposed to say. Congratulations, you're awesome. Heremod was different. Whoa, what's going on here? Okay, going back to Heremod. He was mentioned earlier. I guess maybe he's telling a story. The way he behaved to Eckwala's sons, his rise in the world brought little joy to the Danish people. Only death and destruction he vented his rage on people he caroused with, killed his own comrades, a pariah king who cut himself off from his own kind. Even though God Almighty had made him eminent and powerful and marked him from the start for a happy life. But a change happened. He grew bloodthirsty, gave no more rings to honor the Danes. He suffered in the end for having plagued his people for so long. His life lost happiness. So learn from this and understand true values. I who tell you have entered into wisdom. Okay, so Heremod is brought back again to warn Beowulf that he'll probably be king someday, but don't be a bad king. Heremod didn't listen to his advisors, killed his own comrades, became greedy, and did not share his wealth with his thanes, and he paid the price, and he goes down in history as being a terrible king. It is a great wonder how Almighty God in his magnificence favors our race with rank and scope, and the gift of wisdom. His sway is wide. Sometimes he allows the mind of a man of distinguished birth to follow its bent, grants him fulfillment and felicity on earth, and forts to command in his own company. He permits him to lord it in many wet lands, until the man in his unthinkingness forgets that it will ever end for him. He indulges his desires. Illness of an old age mean nothing to him. His mind is untroubled by envy or malice or thought of enemies with their hate-honed swords. The whole world conforms to his will. He is kept from the worst until an element of overweening enters him and takes hold, while the soul's guard, its sentry, drowses. Grown too distracted, a killer stalks him, an archer who draws a deadly bow. And then the man is hit in the heart. The arrow flies beneath his defenses. The devious promptings of the demon start. His old possessions seem paltry to him now. He covets and resents, dishonors custom, and bestows no gold. And because of good things that the heavenly powers gave him in the past, he ignores the shape of things to come. Then finally, the end arrives when the body he has lent collapses and falls, prey to its death. Ancestral possessions and the goods he hoarded and inherited by another who lets them go with a liberal hand. Okay, I think this passage is fascinating because it really explains, or it really complicates our relationship with God. It's like, okay, Heremod was successful and God blessed to be a king and had everything at his disposal to be successful, and yet he wasn't. He didn't humble himself. He didn't do what was expected to him. And even though he originally was God blessed, he ended up being God cursed and paid the consequences. So it's kind of interesting, the whole interaction between, okay, what God intends for us and what we choose. And I think that's what the writer is kind of talking about here. It even hints at maybe karma, where like what goes around comes around, you get what you deserve. And that, you might be flying high one minute, but God is more patient and you'll get what you have coming to you eventually and everything will be righted. I don't know. Definitely complicated. All right. Oh, flower of warriors. This is probably Hrothgar speaking. O flower of warriors, beware of that trap. Choose, dear Beowulf, the better part eternal rewards. Do not give way to pride. For a brief while your strength is in bloom, and it fades quickly, and soon there will follow illness or the sword to lay you low, or a sudden fire, or a surge of water, or jabbing blade, or javelin from the air, or repellent age. Your piercing eye will dim and darken, and death will arrive, dear warrior, to sweep you away. One more thing. Yeah, Hrothgar's warning him, saying don't be too proud. And he did mention in this part right here, where he himself had suffered. Where was it? Here it is in line 722. Hrothgar says, I who tell you have wintered into wisdom. Hrothgar's admitting that he's made his mistakes. He's suffered from hubris or pride himself, and he's paid the price. So take my heed, because I've been there, buddy. All right. Moving on, we're to line 1769. Just so I ruled the Ring-Danes' country for 50 years, defended them in wartime with spear and sword against constant assaults by many tribes, I came to believe my enemies had faded from the face of the earth. Still, what happened was a hard reversal from bliss to grief. Grendel struck. After lying in wait, he laid waste the land, and from that moment my mind was in dread of his depredations. So I praise God in his heavenly glory that I live to behold this head dripping blood, and after such harrowing, I can look upon it in triumph at last. Take your place then, with pride and pleasure, and move to the feast. Tomorrow morning our treasure will be shared and showered upon you. The Geat was elated, and gladly obeyed the old man's bidding. He sat on the bench, and soon all was restored, the same as before. Happiness came back. The hall was thronged, and a banquet set forth. Black night fell and covered them in darkness. Then the company rose, for the old campaigner, the gray-haired prince, was ready for bed, and a need for rest came over the brave shield-bearing Geat. He was a weary seafarer, far from home, so immediately a houseguard guided him out, one whose office entailed looking after whatever a thane on the road in those days might need or require. It was a noble courtesy. Wow, they kind of called it an early night. Like, this is, I don't know, maybe they're tired of partying because they've been partying for 2 straight nights. Now Grendel's mother is dead. There's no more need to fight, and they decide to go to bed early. I'm a little disappointed. All right, anyway. Line 1799. The great heart rested. The hall towered, gold-shingled and gabled, and the guests slept in it, until the black raven with raucous glee announced heaven's joy, and a hurry of brightness overran the shadows. Warriors rose quickly, impatient to be off. Their own country was beckoning the nobles, and the bold voyager longed to be aboard his distant boat. Then that stalwart fighter ordered Hrunting to be brought to Unferth, and bade Unferth take the sword and thanked him for lending it. I thought he left it down in Grendel's mother's lair. I guess he went back and got it? Anyway. Take the sword and thanked him for lending it. He said he had found it a friend in battle and a powerful help. He put no blame on the blade's cutting edge. He was a considerate man. Or maybe he just put it in a scabbard or in his belt and swam up with it when he had the head and the broken sword. All right. And there the warriors stood in their war gear, eager to go. All right, so they skipped a lot. We skipped the party and just went to the leaving. Eager to go while their honored lord approached the platform where the others sat. The undaunted hero addressed Hrothgar. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. Now we who cross the wide sea have to inform you that we feel a desire to return to Higelac. Here we have been welcomed and thoroughly entertained. You have treated us well. If there is any favor on earth I can perform, beyond deeds of arms I have already done, anything that would merit your affections more, I shall act, my lord, with alacrity. For you that don't know, alacrity means cheerful readiness. If ever I hear from across the ocean that people on your borders are threatening battle as attackers have done from time to time, I shall land with 1,000 thanes at my back to help your cause. Higelac may be young to rule a nation, but this much I know about the king of the Geats. He will come to my aid and want to support me by word and action. In your hour of need, when honor dictates that I raise a hedge of spears around you. Then, if Hrethric should think about traveling as a king's son to the court of the Geats, he will find many friends. Foreign places yield more to one who is himself worth meeting. I think that Hrethric is Higelac's direct descendant son. In 1840, Hrothgar spoke and answered him, "The Lord in his wisdom sent you those words, and they came from the heart. I have never heard so young a man make truer observations. You are strong in body and mature in mind, impressive in speech. If it should come to pass that Hrethel's descendant dies beneath a spear, if deadly battle, or the sword blade, or disease fells the prince who guards your people, and you are still alive, I firmly believe the seafaring Geats won't find a man worthier of acclaim as their king and defender than you, if only you would undertake the lord of your homeland." That's almost foreshadowing, because that's exactly what happens. Higelac's son is going to die young. We'll find that out later. And Beowulf will eventually get his chance to be king. So this is kind of like foreshadowing or like a premonition or something. All right. "My liking for you deepens with time, dear Beowulf. What you have done is to draw two peoples, the Geat nation and us neighboring Danes, into shared peace and a pact of friendship, in spite of hatreds we have harbored in the past. For as long as I rule this far-flung land, treasures will change hands, and each side will treat the other with gifts. Across the gannet's bath, over the broad sea, whirled prows will bring presents and tokens. I know your people are beyond reproach in every respect, steadfast in the old way with friend or foe." Then the Earl's defender furnished the hero. Where was I? I was distracted by the phone. Okay. Then the Earl's defender furnished the hero with 12 treasures and told him to set out, sail with those gifts safely home, to the people he loved, but to return promptly. And so the good and gray-haired Dane, that high-born king, kissed Beowulf and embraced his neck, then broke down in sudden tears. Two forebodings disturbed him in his wisdom, but one was stronger. Never more would they meet each other face to face, and such was his affection that he could not help being overcome. His fondness for the man was so deep-founded, it warmed his heart and wound the heartstrings tight in his breast. Okay, now I don't know if Hrothgar said no homo before he kissed Beowulf, but there's definitely a strong attachment there that is probably worthy of a little bit of research. Could men kiss back in those days? I don't know. Why don't you look it up and you get back to me, okay? All right. The embrace ended, and Beowulf, glorious in his gold regalia, stepped on the green earth. Straining at anchor and ready for boarding, his boat awaited him. So they went on their journey, and Hrothgar's generosity was praised repeatedly. He was a peerless king until old age sapped his strength and did him mortal harm, as it has done so many. Wow, so we're never going to see Hrothgar again. He's done, and he will eventually, somewhere down the line, pass away. All right. What else? I wonder how they got all those horses. Like, Beowulf was given 8 horses. Were they able to get them all in the boat? They don't even go into detail. These are the kinds of things I want to know. All right, moving on. Don't worry, I'm going to stop very soon. Down to the waves then, dressed in the web of their chain mail and war shirts, the young men marched in high spirits. The coast guard spied them, Thane setting forth the same as before. His salute this time was from the top of the cliff, was far from unmannerly. He galloped to meet them, and as they took ship in their shining gear, he said how welcome they would be in Geatland. Then the broad hull was beached on the sand to be cargoed with treasure, horses, and war gear. There we go. There's the horses. The curved prow motioned. The mast stood high above Hrothgar's riches in the loaded hold. The guard who had watched the boat was given a sword with gold fittings, and in future days that present would make him a respected man at his place on the mead bench. Wow, so like this is the first ever Anglo-Saxon literary mention of tipping the valet. The guy watched his boat, so they gave him a sword. That's a pretty nice tip. Then the keel plunged and shook in the sea, and they sailed from Denmark. Right away the mast was rigged with its sea shawl. Sail ropes were tightened, timbers drummed, and stiff winds kept the wave crosser skimming ahead. As she heaved forward, her foamy neck was fleet and buoyant, a lapped prow loping over currents, until finally the Geats caught sight of coastline and familiar cliffs. The keel reared up, wind lifted it home, it hit on the land. The harbor guard came hurrying out to the rolling water. He had watched the offing lord and hard. On the lookout for those friends with the anchor cables, he moored the craft right where it had beached, in case a backwash might catch the hull and carry it away. Then he ordered the prince's treasure trove to be carried ashore. It was a short step from there to where Hrethel's son and heir Hygelac, the gold giver, makes his home on a secure cliff in the company of retainers. I'm going to stop there, and we'll pick up tomorrow. We're stopping on line 1925.